Hi, Connor. Let me see if Jude is able to get in.
Yes, hello. I'm here. I'm gonna leave my camera off because we are struggling to stay cool over here.
Yeah, there you go. So Jude says she might be a few minutes late, so she says start without me. I never did hear back from Joe. So do you want me to go ahead and start? I'll share my screen. And I sent those documents. I don't know if you had a chance to look at them at all.
Yes, I just got the documents, but I believe I had already reviewed the changes prior to the last meeting,
Well,
but
you,
haven't
you had already reviewed what they right. You had already reviewed what was recommended by the planning board, but oh, there's Jude. Yay. But I don't, but Jude and I talked about what our responses should be. And so I sent a document with our proposed responses. So I wanted to get that up and yay. And Jude, you're on mute, but that's yay. That's okay. And we're all hot here. I think that's a fair statement. Um, let me just go let me get the documents back out and sync overlay 622. And then let me also pull up scenic overlay. You got to get the right. Um, you just got to get the right things up here to make sure. Oh, 622. Okay. And then the other thing would be scenic overlay side by side 210 in case we need it. So I'll put that in the back. So there's that. And this is going to go in case we need it. 210. This is the comments. Getting this all organized so that we have everything that we need. And then I'll share my screen. There we go. Alrighty. So let me just there we go. Oh, and Jude, I never did hear back from Joe, so I don't know whether he'll be joining us or not, but I don't know whether you ever hear back from him, but
I had
you had okay. No problem. So let me go
so
do
I've looked over the whole document now, and I think I agree with everything. And I mean, while I didn't, I'm sure we didn't intend for the fine to be, say, comically high. Um, I could certainly live with it staying the same or maybe coming down. But the whole thing with 300 a day was like not adjusted for.
that was crazy. But what I did do, and Jude, what you probably didn't see, but I put it over in red here because this is something that I investigated actually just today. So we had talked about, I said I would go research the fines because what the planning board comment was that they thought that our fine was a little high. I did go do a search and I did look at fines, and there were different sections that had fines because you can have fines for parking, I guess parking violations, all kinds of, building violations, all kinds of violations that you can have fines for. And so so in any event, the one that who had the highest fine was the tree law. The highest fine I could find in the current law was the fine noted in the tree law, which says any person in violation shall be guilty of misdemeanor upon conviction, punished by a fine of no more than $1,000. So we've talked about 5,000 a day. And I know that we've also got, when we deal with scenic overlay, you have some very wealthy people who don't care about $1,000. Okay, I pay my fee. Let me go, have my view. So I do get that. I do get that 1,000 probably is not going to be the deterrent we hope it to be, but 5,000 may be. Um, anyway, so in any
I
event,
feel like I mean, it's the kind of thing that I feel like we're gonna probably have to like see play out in a court no matter what we choose. And I really do feel like, given what we've seen and the level of I don't know what the exact word I'm looking at, but the sort of laissez-faire attitude of some of the more wealthy people,
Mhm.
especially during my time on the planning board. It costs the town money.
Sure.
It costs everyone money, and this is a way to keep bad actors at the table.
Well, so so my thought, and I know I was always on the lower end, and I put the 5,000 in because that was the consensus. But I will tell you that my thought, and I'm going down to the bottom, hopefully to where it is, proposed code. Let me go find it. Um, Yeah, 5,000 per day. I mean, I would be comfortable. I think 1,000 a day would get the point across because I don't think anybody, no matter how rich they are, people that are rich don't want to pay 5 cents for a bag at the grocery store. So I would think that if we said 1,000 a day, because it's going to keep going until they correct it, and eventually it's going to hit 100,000. So I would think if we said 1,000 a day, I think we would still achieve the same wake up. I think, I don't know what the consensus thinks. The final decision will be the town board, but we've got a per day rate that others don't. But the per day rate is only active if somebody is not jumping on their issue when you say, hey, you got an issue. If they don't jump on it, and if they don't have a plan in place promptly, and if they don't follow their plan, that's when it starts kicking in. So if they do what they need to do repairs to repair their damage, they won't get this. But I mean, I always thought 5,000 was, yeah, I mean, it's up to the town board what they want. I would feel like I could defend 1,000. I don't think can defend 5,000. And since it's a per day charge, I think anybody, no matter how rich they are, if they wait a whole year, you're talking about $365,000. Nobody wants that. So, I don't care how rich they are. They're not going to want that.
I
So
mean, sure. I 1,000. I forget what we did for the adjusted rate now at this point, but I'm pretty sure it was more than 1,000.
the adjusted rate.
Like we adjusted just for inflation. Uh,
Oh,
and the thing and beyond that, I do just want to say, while it's hard to imagine, needing that much money or anything like that, you know, to say 15 or 2 even, I mean, I am imagining a world where we have a true, emergent condition, you know, not just tree removal, not just a roof that's too shiny or whatever, something where, we've got uncooperative people and perhaps, a water issue, something more akin to, I don't know, let's say a shady dump.
yeah. Well, understand that here we've only put the fine on tree cutting. We haven't put a fine on shiny roofs or the other stuff. We've only put,
Uh, well, I
yeah.
guess the idea though that when we were discussing it, like there was talk about like, we've seen people. I think it's not unheard of to hear people poisoning these trees and stuff like that. My only question here is, at what point, uh, I would, all I'll say is while I can definitely come down from 5,000, 1,000 just sounds low to me. It's been so long since we did that calculation, but
But again, it's per day, so it's
I
not just $1,000. It's per day. So
no,
if they
I,
don't correct it, they're going to be broke eventually. If they never correct their issues, they're going to go broke. So I think $1,000. Well, Jude, if you were to weigh in, what number you originally liked 5,000, I think.
Well, I think it's a deterrent. I think it's a message. We're taking it seriously. This isn't a joke. We mean it. We're not kidding. I know when I had a conversation with Butch about short-term rental, he did say he would like to see the fine in the zoning law so that it's not just up to the court to say, oh, $100,
Mhm.
So I think we should put in a high number. I mean, if 5,000 is too high, I mean, I think it'll get people off their butts and moving. You know, it's like if you make it too easy, they'll
But
they
is $1,000 a day easy though? If somebody says, if they dig in their heels and I'm not doing anything, I don't care what you say. Well, a year later, they're owing $365,000. That's not easy. So that's why I think $1,000 a day, that they at some point, they won't have to go broke before they realize they got to do something because it's,
So here's sort of the thing. I am scraping the upper limits of my imagination to, you know, base what's the horrible adage from the Iraq War, the unknown unknowns. Like
Mhm,
uh I I I would rather go in higher and see the town what the town board says. I'm not saying it has to stay um five, but again, it is not to me in the scope in it when we think of the scale of some of what we've seen already and the
mhm,
time that it has taken the town,
mhm.
not just to address it for the sake of like being expeditious and all that and getting people to the table expeditiously just to address the issue, but just to treat it with the kind of urgency that it deserves. I
Mhm.
think this again, we should think of this as a symbolic deterrent more so
Well,
than like the town board does not have to issue $5,000. That they could never do that. The point, and we've written the law to say this is going to the fine is determined by essentially the expeditious nature of which the violator comes to the table and strikes up the remediation plan.
well, right. And in fact, they won't get fined at all if they're expeditious about it. Because we've
Well,
said if you're there within 2 weeks and you've got a plan for remediation and then you stick to if you have an aggressive plan for remediation and if you stick to your plan, you won't get fined at all. But you got to go plant the trees and you got to make sure that they stay alive.
exactly, and so while I want to be flexible about this, 1,000 to me does still seem low in terms of an upper ceiling to
Right.
address.
Yeah, but again, it's a daily fine. But I've already said my piece. You've said your piece. Judy said her piece. So if the two of you were to say, what number do you want to go with? What number do the two of you want to go with?
I again, if I will, I think cutting it in half is still a good intimidating number. I want the number to be intimidating. I don't want people to thumb through our laws anymore and think, ooh, look at this slip and slide of loopholes that, I can afford to, essentially outpace the town on.
Right.
If I say 2,500, that's I think I still I that's really low. I think in terms of a compromise, and also again high enough as an upper limit to where if I saw that on the page as a possibility, I would
Mhm.
take everything I do in the scenic overlay very, very seriously. And I live here, so
Right.
I'm doing this to myself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I know you're also being careful because you understand the impacts. So Jude, would you be okay? Because again, I think if we go with 5,000, the town board is definitely going to drop it. If we went with 2,500, I think there's a chance the town board might say, well, okay. So I can't guarantee what they're going to do, but 2,500, I think, would be that deterrent. And people wouldn't need too many days worth of those before they say, hey, this really isn't a good thing. So I don't know whether Jude, if you'd be okay with 2,500 for the purpose of, because we're taking this back to the town board. So
right.
I don't know how you would feel about 2,500.
2,500 is good because it is up to
Right.
2,500, right? It's not necessarily that much, but I think we do have to send a message. But this, you've got me thinking about other violations. Do we have a fine for other violations in there?
Well, I don't think we have a fine for other violations in here.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
let me
that
just,
might be
but
something to
let me
look at.
just update my thing here. That's fine. That's, I'm just gonna write, we have adjusted our daily.
Um, did you find out if it ever went to the Ulster County Planning Board? The whole,
Oh,
originally?
that's a good question. I certainly was asking about the tree law, or not, I'm sorry, not tree law, the fence law. I was asking about the fence law, and I should find out about both of these.
Because well, the original version
Mhm.
went to the planning board was supposed to go, I mean, I don't even know if it went to the Ulster County Planning Board when
Okay.
this was
Mhm.
first. I just don't know if it ever went to them,
Yeah, I'd have to go
or
double
if we
check.
ever got a response.
Right, so fence law. And I didn't talk to Bill today about whether the fence law went either. Go to UCPB. Okay, okay. So, let me just write down, we have just fee to, to, um, birthday. Note that this is an up to is to be a determined. Okay, so we've done that. So that's fine. Okay. Okay. Good. So I'm just gonna kind of, so the one thing, the thing that I'm still not happy with, so I know that so I know Connor said he's already looked at everything. So I don't, and we just, in some cases, the planning board said, well, can you do this or that? And if it was easy to do, Jude and I said, well, let's just go do it because, it's either way can work, and we'll, since our planning board has a preference, we can go with their way because either way can work. Some things we just have to I just need to remind the town board of some things. Let me, and then we're saying, as you probably saw, Connor, there was an item here that we thought, well, it's really better to not incorporate it because we think that that's an issue to incorporate. Now this one I did want to ask again here. With the two cords, you can only do 2 cords of wood a year. I know that, Jude, when you and I talked, and it's a very valid answer. And let me just come back down and see if I can find it here. Right. So the proposed code, we did not change this line here, talking about the harvesting of, because first of all, we have said in the scenic overlay, we've updated the verbiage to be more clear, to say these exclusions, there are exclusions from having to worry about a special use permit, but you're not excluded if you're in the scenic overlay. So we've added some verbiage to make it more clear that what we're saying is, if you're in the scenic overlay, you follow the scenic overlay law. If you're not in the scenic overlay, then these exclusions apply to you. But if you are in the scenic overlay, we made it more clear that these exclusions do not apply to you. You got to go to section 260.
So what's your contention then? What's your,
Well,
what
I
are
was saying,
you?
well, they asked if it's in the zoning code. They asked if we could clarify what 20 cords a year is 20 cords a year, 20 cords a year per acre, 20 cords a year per 2 acres. They were just asking for
Oh, no,
clarification.
I think that's total. That's just total, right? I mean,
Well, but somebody might own a half-acre property, somebody might own a 20-acre property. So that would be total, but shouldn't it be by the number of acres? But the other thing too is, my original
I
thought
don't,
was, this has nothing to do with what we're doing of the scenic overlay law. We're talking about trees and stuff. We're talking about the view. And this piece of code is not scenic overlay. This is the special use permit section 63. But we're just saying,
yeah,
so this doesn't even have to do with scenic overlay. This is not the scenic overlay section. So my
yeah,
first answer was going
yeah.
to be, it's not applicable to us because we're talking about scenic overlay, but it is zoning code, and they're saying, hey, can you clarify this 20 cords a year?
I mean, my inclination was always that is a total of 20 cords a year for a property. And the idea, again, because it's like 20 cords is not a small,
Yeah, it's probably 20 trees. I know that when my late husband, when Jerry used to bring down trees, if he brought down a full-size tree, one tree might be a cord of wood. It would be 20 full-size trees. And if you've got
Yeah,
an acre of property, that's kind of a lot. If you've got 20 acres of property, it's not that much. So the planning board has raised a point to say it'd be nice to have it based on acreage. They threw out they threw out, for example, 2 cords per 2 acres per year, just an example, not an actual amount. But I
I
kind of think
see.
that
I just want to the thing I think there is that this is based more on a sort of, I think, state law,
uh,
that allows people to cut down their 20. And I feel like this is us addressing that more so than changing it. We're like, I would say, like, we would have to kind of go look at the source of that law, and to confirm that, because if the state says that
mhm,
it's not by acre, I don't think we should get into changing that.
right.
That,
So,
and I'm pretty sure that's where that comes from.
okay, so here's what I wrote. This is what Jude and I were answering 2 weeks ago, and it sounds like you're in the same boat. Is I think instead of us even trying to change it, this just says this section this section 2060-63. It's not part of the scenic overlay law. It is not a chapter, not a. Let me write it this way: scenic overlay chapter in the law. It's not a scenic overlay chapter in the law. Our purpose in touching the section was to specify that exclusions do not apply to land and scenic overlay, because in the scenic overlay, you got to follow the scenic overlay law. So we added a few words to make this clear. We did not touch, nor did we plan to touch, the words already there regarding 20 cords per year. So our answer to the planning board is just saying, hey, this really wasn't our purview. Our purview was scenic overlay, and this is not a scenic overlay chapter, or section. So, what did I say?
That's fine. Yeah, because I don't think that's for us to get into. I think us putting a clarification
Mm.
limiting that and requiring it to be part of special use permit makes sense. It's just that to make it more expansive is definitely, I don't think, not in our purview.
Right, to be fussing with the words, right? Okay, so we're okay with that. Okay, so
Totally.
okay, so that's good. Um, and so, and I'm not, I don't know, was I really agree that there was, I think that we helped this, because the red is, the blue is what we did in our first pass, and the red is what we did in the second pass. And so they weren't so sure about the open-ended thing about inconspicuous as possible. I think they thought that was a mushy word, but I think we need to keep it, and that's what was originally there. So we did add the restriction of development rather than discouragement. We made that a stronger statement. So
Yes.
we did make that stronger, but as far as these other verbiage, I think it belongs. And then they said, can you cut these 2 sentences in half? Well, that was easy enough to do. So we did that.
And I just want to say that my hope in a best case scenario is that people look at those fines and then go through this really carefully with
Oh, right,
with
right,
the planning board, so
right.
that the planning board, it can be the people who kind of go and put a little more finality on what in each individual case should be, what's the word we use, should be essentially inconspicuous as possible, like, that's
Right,
for them
right.
to determine. So I'm hoping that all this draws people to the planning board closer for more clarity, because they want to get this right.
Yeah, yep, agreed. Okay. So we're on to H. Now here is where I have asked Melissa. So item H was, we had added, and this I know kind of, you never really liked this, and I'm not sure whether Jude actually liked it either, but you kind of went with it, because as a town board member, I was getting flack from people to say, hey, I bought my house with this view. Now you're telling me that I gotta let whatever wants to grow up in my, between my house and the view. Do I have to let any acorn grow into an oak tree? There was nothing. So we had added this to say it would be governed by an SUP. and the planning board would be involved, and you could do maintenance, but the planning board is going to be give you your restrictions and tell you what you can and can't do. And that recommendation came out of, I talked to Melissa and Butch, and I thought I talked to Judy Kerman, but anyway, so their answer on this is absolutely indefensible in court and asking for legal lawsuits. The language and suggestion is extremely problematic and not enforceable. Homeowners' desire to keep clear views has resulted in major damage to the forest canopy and the view shed. Well, I would think if it's an SUP and they've got restrictions given by the planning board, I don't know how that would be, but in any event, only trimming for tree health or protection of structures should be permitted if deemed necessary. But kind of what we're talking about down here anyway is the advice of a forester. They can preserve the building envelope that was approved for the property, maintain a clearing around the building, comply with fire safety, implement selective cutting that will enhance the health of the forest. We've said all these things here. We've put verbiage in here that says these are the reasons you're going to be allowed to do it: fire safety, cutting for the health of the forest, and the planning board has to give you an SUP to tell you what you can and can't do. So the same things they're saying here, that you need to, the only reasons you could do it is for these reasons. Well, these are the reasons we've said, and we're giving the planning board the ability to control it. So if they don't like this verbiage, what verbiage do they like? So I had asked Melissa, can I go back to a planning board meeting? And she was going to let me know. They, of course, didn't meet last week because it was Juneteenth. Their meeting was on a federal holiday. So they didn't meet on the 19th because it was a federal holiday. And I've given her my availability. I'm available. They have 5 meetings because they have a work session in July. I'm available for 3 of the 5 meetings in July and August. So my hope is to talk with them about that, because we're getting pushback, and I don't see why they had such a big problem with that. And then even their advice here in black matches what we already put in red. So I feel like I need
Well,
to
well, I think it's not so much their point is that those things were missing. I mean, if I understand what we're talking about correctly, it sounds like their concerns is my concern when we went through this, which is that it's creating this giant loophole for people in the in between point to essentially, in the transit of selling and someone buying a property, creating some kind of view that is then protected.
Well,
Uh,
but we've said that if you want to maintain your, what we recommended here is if you want to maintain your scenic overlay property, you have to go to the planning board and get their restrictions, their regulations. Because I know when I was on the planning board and they would have a case, the case would always have with it an attachment that said, yeah, we granted you your SUP, but here are the rules you got to follow. And so the thought is, by them having to grant the SUPs, and by them being able to provide the rules to follow, it can say, yes, you can have 50 feet around your house for fire safety. Yes, if an arborist says the forest will be healthier if you do this, this, and this, you can cut this and this and this because it's going to make the whole forest healthier. So
yeah,
this had some stuff like that. And I don't fully understand why they said it was horrible.
So can I weigh in for just a second?
Sure.
yeah.
I think that one of the problems is until there is some visual record of what exists,
Oh, right.
it's getting a little slippery. And the other thing is, I think last time you and I know Melissa said you couldn't come to the next meeting, but I did say I thought someone should talk to the planning board about this and, and really get a little bit more detail. So that's my 2 cents. But until there's a visual record, somebody could say, oh yeah, I had this view, and how can we prove
Right.
them wrong?
Right.
That's a little bit of a problem with this.
Right. That is a good point. That's an excellent point. So we need to, and that was one of the earlier points, is I need to remind the town board that we need to get that viewscape. We need to get those
Yeah.
photos.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is it really, as soon as we get that, this all becomes much, much more in focus. And I just got to tell you, it's been years. I was on the planning board when I was making the suggestion and soliciting David Lax to where I submitted photos of
Right.
my own home to show what this could be like, and how we can start building this database. But like, it's not even going to be that expensive in the scope of things. I mean, it's really, let's do it. Let's get on it.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So for now, we'll leave it just at this, that we'll hopefully get some agreed upon, with the town attorney. In addition, it is critical.
You could also maybe make a note about,
Have
it's
a
gonna be
video.
har- it's gonna
Let
be-
me let me get this in here though. Hang on a sec, because it's I don't do two things very well. If I'm focused on this, I'm not listening. So let me just focus on this first. It's really have a video record of the viewscape,
Well, it's really more of a photographic record, right? I mean,
photographic. Okay.
and you might oh, what, you're going in,
Sorry. Right in the
but
wrong spot.
I would just say an aerial photographic record.
Uh, record of
Photographic / video. Who cares? Let's get it all, right? Well, while we're up there, I don't know.
photographic, plus video would be okay. Let me get my typos out of here. Plus video, okay. Plus video, be okay. Record of the viewscape. So, the planning. Max to work with. I'll put this down. Yeah, okay. So those are, so this one item is kind of on hold. So that's the main thing. And I'm just,
Right.
is anything, so I think everything else we've talked about, I think everything else is, because most of what they said was straightforward. They need some money. There's some here, that, yeah, and I would like to ask the planning board to estimate the funds needed. And then I'll talk with the supervisor to determine the next steps.
Again, I recommend David Lax. If you want to reach out to him, I've given his contact before. He can get you pricing and all that.
Yeah, and I don't know if that should be an official response, because that's kind of, because by law we may have we may have to put out a bid or whatever. So I won't, but I'll tuck that away in my notes, however.
Well, if nothing else, it would give you an idea what the range is gonna look like,
Right,
so that maybe it'll be more palatable.
right. Could do, right, David Lax could do the viewscape. Drone, he does, it would be drone photos, right?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, okay. Let me write drone in here. Have drone. And it's really the full scenic overlay viewscape. That's facts. Okay. Alrighty. So, I'm thinking, so their final response at the bottom was, and of course they would like to be updating their scenic overlay handbook, and I put a note here that I'll discuss with the supervisor to determine the next steps, but the planning board ought to estimate the funds needed to accomplish this. So if they can do an estimate, I can go to the supervisor, and determine next steps. So, and they say, please consider this our formal review complete. So I guess my question, so Connor, well, actually, Jude, you're on the planning board as well. So since they've already said, consider this our formal review complete, are all of my notes in red here? Are all of these notes just to go to the town board? Because now this is with the town board, because we didn't adopt everything the planning board said, or should we be letting the planning board know what we did and didn't adopt?
I don't think, I mean, I think would be courteous to respond, yes, but I don't think that we necessarily need to entirely open it up. And while I do, the one thing I will say, if you're going to get more clarity on that other point, that's fine. On maintaining views, quote unquote.
Right, yeah.
But like that is something I think we should get our hands around. Because while I think I understand where their frustration is, I do agree that they didn't express it very clearly what they want said. So aside from that, yes, I'm totally okay with moving ahead with everything else.
Yeah, and so you think, so in your view, moving ahead means for now I'll send this back, because I think before I take it to the town board, I think I need to know when I can go to the planning board meeting and get the other things worked out. So I don't think I can take this back to the town board yet. I feel like,
Well, what I would say is fine if we don't want to go immediately to the town board, let's email Melissa and just see if we can get a dialogue going in the meantime to get some clarity. Like maybe this is something Peter can just email us rather than waiting for the next meeting. Like just say like, hey, we're going through everything and this one stuck out. Can you please get us just, if you have suggestions, can you provide them ASAP? Sort
yeah.
of.
And I've just stopped sharing for a moment because I am going to take a look at my email and just see whether, because the last thing that she said was she's going to ask Peter, and let me see whether, and I haven't got anything back from that. So, okay. All righty. Oh, and it's loading. So let me go back to my Zoom. Yay. Alrighty. Well, I feel like so again, you think that I can go ahead and send both documents back so they can see the updated document and they can see our updated comments about we've incorporated a whole pile of stuff, what we didn't incorporate, the reasons why, so they have an opportunity, so they're not blindsided by anything. You think it's okay just to send the document as it is and say we would like to, if we can get some head starts on these conversations on that maintenance item, it may help us move along faster.
Yeah, but mainly just for the point of thanking them and saying thank you for taking the time to do this, and here's, we took the time to consider everything. That kind of thing. Just
Yeah.
feels respectful. Hopefully, it's not audacious.
Right.
I don't always know the difference.
Yeah. So that's okay. So, but as I say, and we considered all and incorporated most, how best I'm just making my notes here, to proceed with the maintenance verbiage. But then I should also, I'll also go in there and I'm going to highlight, let me get the things back up again and then I can share again. Zoning law. Whoops. You don't need that one. Let me get up what I do need. Scenic overlay. Whoops. Zoning law script. And let me go share screen again. Zoom. Here we go. So I'm just going up to the top where we go. Everywhere where it says, Laura, remind the town board of this need. I'm just gonna put it in bold. Every time I have a to do. Just looking for my to-dos here. Melissa. That's bold. I have it here in the photograph. Right. And I think that that is the same thing that we set up here. We need a baseline photo record, and because it says it and it just says it again. And let me just come down here. There we go. So this is there to do, please estimate the funds needed to accomplish this.
Hey, Ruby.
And then my to do will be to discuss the next steps with the supervisor. So, okay. So it's mostly for them to review, but they do have one to do, and that's estimate this. And then I have a couple of to dos. So I think we're good. Now, so we're good on that. I do keep asking Bill, I've got to ask him again, where is the fence law with the Ulster County Planning Board? Because the Woodstock Planning Board said our fence law recommendations were fine with them. So we still need to, I need to find out what's up with the Ulster County Planning Board. So still have to do that. And then Connor, Jude and I were discussing, so we can get back into the STR law. We can resume that. I think we're good for tonight. I think we're hot enough. I don't know whether you all want to keep talking or whether we're good for tonight. We've accomplished the goal of tonight. But then the other thing is, do we want on our next meeting to be getting back into the STR law? And are we gonna, because we were honestly butting heads, and I'm not sure how we get around doing that. Just saying.
Well, let's get back to it and see where we're at. I will
Okay.
try to think more. I mean, if we can, I'm sure there's a compromise. We just need to figure out where it's at.
Yeah. Well, good. Okay. So we'll plan. Now, the other thing Jude and I were talking about. Now, I don't know where the housing law is going to go, and I know Connor, you're well aware of the political life, and when you have an election happening, which is happening tomorrow, I know you're well aware that some things work better when they're addressed after the big days like election day. So what I'm driving at is the housing law, and the housing update has the subdivision part, which really is intended to really affect protecting our environment and our land better. And then, of course, it has the housing part, which is intended to make it easier to build some more housing, but not tons more housing. And so we had the public hearing focused on the subdivision part, which technically speaking is not zoning law because it's not chapter 260, but still, I always appreciate the input from this group. So Jude and I were talking about whether or not this group wanted to take on looking at the subdivision piece, because that everybody should agree we want to protect the environment. So we might be able to go further faster with that versus, the housing. We kind of put on pause the discussions on the other chapters, and we'll see what we decide to do after tomorrow comes and goes. We'll see, how we're feeling about, is it the right time to proceed? So we'll have to see. We were going to try to do 3 public hearings on the zoning law because it's so big. So we have to get that figured out. But I didn't know whether you had an opinion. So STR would be the logical next thing to do, but I didn't know whether you had an opinion of what you think about
let's
or anything
well
else.
I'd say let's, if it's something that is, if we feel it's in our purview and relevant to that, I'm definitely interested in having a look once, at least once we made another serious pass through STR law, and we can maybe get that out of our hands and into some additional scrutiny.
Right. So we'll definitely do that next.
I assume, given that you're asking me, I assume that you guys do think we should have a look at it.
Well, we could. I mean, it's not a firm decision. We chit-chatted about, gee, maybe it's a good idea. We weren't saying, oh, we got to do this, but we were saying it might be, we might be able to help the process if we did, but we weren't married to it, so to speak.
I'm interested. I'm currently reading Abundance by Ezra Klein, and it is very much about how among other things, how well-intended environmental laws can put a bottleneck on.
And I gotta tell you, I completely disagree with that whole philosophy. That's one opinion that has not been proven by anything.
I love each of you, but you know,
It's anti-zoning is what it is, and it's anti-environment, and I just really.
yeah. So I love both of you, but I'm anticipating another big tug of war.
That's fine. That's why I want to do it. You know, there's something to, I think there's something to be found in there.
Sure. Excellent. 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 Okay. So we'll get that thought. STR. So we're agreeing STR law next. So now I do have a vacation coming up. So the meeting that I did ask to get canceled. So our next meeting would be, we do the 2nd and the 4th. So the second Monday is going to be the 14th. I'm available for that. The Sunday, the 2 weeks after that, the 28th, I'm not available. So just so as you know, and then I'm available again in August on the 11th. So the only meeting that I'm aware that that I'm not at, and I went ahead and canceled it, was the 28th. So our next meeting is July 14th, and I will look to do, with all the things going on in my life, I kind of set aside looking at all those comments from the survey. I will get back to that so I can get, because I did one chunk of comments, but I did one set of what people answered this way, what were all their comments. Now I need to look at the other ways. If they answered another way, what are all their comments? So I will look to get some more of that done before we meet again. But again, our next meeting is July 14th.
Okie dokie.
Yay. Well, thank you both. Do we want to be official and have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yay. I'll second that, and all in favor.
All right.
So thank you both so much. I know everybody keeps busy, and I appreciate the time you put here. So thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you. And I'll copy you on what I send Melissa.
All right. Will do. Bye-bye.
Bye.